Welcome back to Forgotten Empires, Bedtime History. Before you get comfortable, tonight we ride out onto the endless grasslands of Central Asia to meet a people who owned nothing but their horses and conquered almost everything. From a scattered collection of warring tribes, they built the largest land empire in the history of the world. Tonight's story is the Mongols and the man who united them, Genghis Khan. If you enjoy falling asleep to the greatest stories ever told, hit subscribe and leave a like. New stories drop every 3 to 4 days. Tell us in the comments, what city are you writing from tonight? We love knowing where in the world our listeners are drifting off to sleep. Now, close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let the wind of the steppe carry you back 800 years. The Mongols, the empire that conquered the world. Close your eyes. Imagine the steppe, an ocean of grass, stretching from horizon to horizon, further than any eye can see. The wind moves across it in waves, bending the grass, whispering across the endless plain. There are no cities here, no walls, no farms, only the grass, the sky, and the wind. This is the homeland of the Mongols, and from this empty, silent place came a storm that would shake the entire world. Part 1. The People of the Felt Tents. For thousands of years, nomadic peoples wandered the great steppe of Central Asia. They did not build cities. They did not plant crops. They followed their herds, sheep and goats and cattle, and above all, horses. The horse was everything to these people. It carried them across vast distances. It provided milk and meat. Its hide made their clothing. Its hair made their ropes. A Mongol child learned to ride before they learned to walk. By the age of 3, they could sit a horse alone. By the age of 5, they could shoot a bow from the saddle. They lived in round tents called gurs, made of felt stretched over wooden frames, warm in the brutal winters, cool in the scorching summers, and easy to pack up and carry when it was time to move on. They were tough, perhaps the toughest people who have ever lived. They endured temperatures that swung from 40 degrees below zero in winter to 40 degrees above in summer. They could ride for days, eating almost nothing, drinking the blood of their own horses when no other food was available. They were, quite simply, built for war. But for most of their history, they turned that ferocity against each other. Part 2. The Boy Named Temujin. Around the year 1162, in a remote corner of the steppe, a boy was born. According to legend, he came into the world clutching a clot of blood in his fist, a sign, the shaman said, that he was destined for greatness. His name was Temujin, and his early life was one of almost unimaginable hardship. When Temujin was 9 years old, his father was poisoned by an enemy tribe, and suddenly, the family had nothing. Their followers abandoned them. Their animals were taken. Temujin, his mother, and his siblings were left alone on the steppe, to survive or to die. They survived, barely. They ate roots and fish and small animals. They endured winters that killed weaker families. And through those brutal years, Temujin learned the lessons that would shape him forever. That loyalty was everything. That betrayal must be answered. And that survival belonged to the strong. As a young man, Temujin was captured by a rival tribe and made a slave, a wooden collar locked around his neck. But he escaped. He hid in a river, breathing through the reeds. while his captors searched the banks. A man who had once helped him found him, and instead of turning him in, hid him and set him free. Temujin never forgot a kindness, and he never forgave a betrayal. These two principles would build an empire. Part 3. The Uniter of Tribes. Slowly, Temujin began to rise. He was a natural leader, brave in battle, generous with his followers, and utterly ruthless with his enemies. But what made him different, what made him revolutionary, was how he treated people. In the traditional steppe world, loyalty went to your blood, your family, your clan, your tribe. Temujin destroyed this system. He promoted men based on merit, not birth. A common shepherd who showed courage and skill could rise to command thousands. He shared the spoils of war with all his followers, not just the nobles. He protected the families of soldiers who died in battle. And when he conquered a tribe, he did not simply enslave them. He absorbed them, made them Mongols, gave them a place in his growing nation. For the first time in history, the tribes of the steppe began to see themselves not as Tatars or Karats or Naimans, but as one people. In the year 1206, the tribes gathered at a great assembly, and they proclaimed Temujin the supreme leader of all the Mongols. They gave him a new title, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. He was perhaps 44 years old, and he was just getting started. Part 4. The War Machine. The army that Genghis Khan created was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was fast, it was disciplined, and it was absolutely deadly. Every Mongol soldier was a horseman, and not just one horse. Each warrior brought several horses on campaign, switching between them to keep a fresh mount, always ready. This gave the Mongol army a speed that stunned their enemies. They could cover 100 miles in a day, appearing where no one expected them, striking before word of their approach had even arrived. Their primary weapon was the composite bow, small enough to fire from horseback, but powerful enough to punch through armor at 200 yards. A Mongol warrior could fire this bow at a full gallop, timing each shot for the moment when all 4 hooves left the ground, so the arrow flew true. They could shoot forward, they could shoot to the side, and most terrifying of all, they could turn in the saddle and fire backward while pretending to retreat. The Mongol army was organized with mathematical precision, units of 10, units of 100, units of 1,000, units of 10,000, called a tumen. Orders could pass through this structure with incredible speed and clarity. They communicated across the battlefield with flags and torches and whistling arrows. They used tactics that seemed like magic to their enemies. The feigned retreat, pretending to flee, drawing the enemy into a trap, then turning to destroy them. The encirclement, surrounding an entire army and closing in from all sides. They coordinated attacks across distances of hundreds of miles. Multiple armies converging on a single target at exactly the right moment. It was warfare centuries ahead of its time. Part 5. The Conquest of the World. Once the Mongols were united, Genghis Khan turned outward, first to China. The great civilizations of China had always looked down on the steppe nomads as barbarians. They had built the Great Wall to keep them out. The wall did not help. The Mongols learned quickly, At first, they knew nothing of how to attack walled cities, so they captured engineers, Chinese engineers, Persian engineers, and they learned. They learned to build siege engines, catapults, battering rams, towers taller than city walls. They learned to divert rivers to flood cities into submission. They learned to hurl disease over the walls to sicken the defenders. Within a few years, no wall in the world could stop them. Then came the West. The great empire of Khwarezmia, covering modern Iran and Central Asia, made a fatal mistake. Its governor murdered a group of Mongol merchants and envoys. Genghis Khan had offered peace and trade. The response was the massacre of his people. His vengeance was total. The Mongol armies fell upon Khwarezmia like the wrath of heaven. Great cities that had stood for centuries, Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Nishapur, were destroyed. Some were never rebuilt. The scale of the destruction is difficult to comprehend. In some cities, the entire population was killed. The Mongols were not cruel for its own sake. It was strategy. Terror was a weapon. Cities that resisted were annihilated as a warning. Cities that surrendered were often spared as an incentive. The message spread across the world: resist the Mongols and die. Submit and live. Many chose to submit. Part 6. The Empire after Genghis. Genghis Khan died in the year 1227. The exact circumstances remain a mystery. A fall from a horse, most say. He was around 65 years old. His body was carried back to Mongolia in secret and buried in an unmarked grave. According to legend, the soldiers who conducted the funeral killed everyone they met along the way to keep the location secret. Then they themselves were killed. To this day, no one knows where Genghis Khan is buried. The greatest conqueror in history lies somewhere beneath the steppe he loved, his grave, lost forever. But his empire did not die with him. His sons and grandsons continued the conquest. Under his successors, the Mongol Empire reached its greatest extent. It stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the deserts of the Middle East. At its height, it covered 9 million square miles, the largest contiguous land empire in the history of the world. 1 in every 4 or 5 people on Earth lived under Mongol rule. His grandson Kublai Khan completed the conquest of China and founded a dynasty there that would rule for a century. It was Kublai's China that the traveler Marco Polo visited, returning to Europe with tales so extraordinary that many refused to believe them. Cities greater than any in Europe, wealth beyond imagining, paper money, coal that burned like wood, a postal system that could carry a message across the empire in days. Part 7. The Mongol Peace. Here is something that history often forgets. The Mongols were not only destroyers. Once the conquest was complete, they created something remarkable. Historians call it the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. For the first time in history, a single power controlled the entire Silk Road, the great network of trade routes connecting China to Europe, and the Mongols made it safe. A merchant could travel from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, protected by Mongol law every step of the way. It was said that a young woman carrying a sack of gold could travel the length of the empire without fear. And along these safe roads moved more than silk and spices. Ideas moved. Chinese inventions flowed west: gunpowder, printing, the compass, technologies that would transform Europe and help launch the Renaissance. Knowledge moved: astronomy, mathematics, medicine. The Mongols were curious. They gathered scholars and craftsmen from every land they conquered. They practiced religious tolerance that was astonishing for their age. In the Mongol capital, Buddhists and Muslims and Christians and shamanists all worshipped freely. The empire built on terror became, for a time, a bridge between civilizations. Part 8. The fading of the storm. But no empire lasts forever. The Mongol Empire was simply too large to hold together. Distances too vast, cultures too different. Slowly, it fragmented into pieces. The Khanate of the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Yuan dynasty in China. Each went its own way. Each was slowly absorbed into the cultures it had conquered. The Mongols who ruled Persia became Muslims. The Mongols who ruled China became Chinese in their ways. The storm that had swept out of the steppe slowly settled and faded. By the time another century had passed, the great empire was gone. The descendants of Genghis Khan still ruled here and there. Tamerlane, the Mughal emperors of India, echoes of the great conquest. But the empire itself, the vast unified realm that had stretched across the world, was a memory. Epilogue: The legacy of the Khan. So what did they leave behind? For centuries, the Mongols were remembered only as destroyers, a savage horde, a natural disaster in human form. And it is true, the conquests killed tens of millions of people, perhaps more than any other event before the 20th century. Cities were erased, civilizations were shattered, the scars lasted for generations. But there was more to them than destruction. They connected a world that had been separate. They moved ideas and technologies across continents. They ruled with a tolerance that put many later empires to shame. They created laws, protected trade, enabled the exchange that would eventually wake Europe from its slumber. And they came from nothing, from a scattered collection of quarreling tribes, owning nothing but their horses and their courage. They built the largest empire the world has ever seen. Today, the steppe is quiet again. The great herds still move across the endless grass. The gyrs still stand against the enormous sky. And somewhere out there, in an unmarked grave, beneath the land he loved, sleeps the boy named Temujin, who was born with a clot of blood clutched in his fist, who survived slavery and starvation, and who became, for a brief and violent and extraordinary moment, the master of the world. Sleep now. Let the wind of the steppe move gently over you. Imagine the endless grass, the enormous sky, the distant sound of hoofbeats fading into silence. A people who owned nothing and conquered everything. An empire that rose like a storm and settled like the dusk. Good night. And remember, every empire believed it would last forever. None of them did. Not even the greatest of them all. Good night.